Right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Spring 2022 Speaker Series. We're really excited to get started off with a bang. Really quickly, those of you joining us and not aware of, we have our Econ Games in-person conference that we're hosting on March 24th and 25th at the University of Kentucky. We're really excited about having an in-person conference, and we have Fisher Homes as our sponsors. And for more information, please visit our website, theecongames.com, or also reach out to your advisor if you're interested in participating at the Econ Games. Today, we're really excited to have Dr. Jose Fernandez. He is a professor at the University of Louisville, also the chair of the economics department at the University of Louisville. He graduated from the University of Virginia and has a wide variety of research publications in diverse topics. And we're really excited to host him and share a few of his success stories, and then also talk to us about graduate program at the University of Louisville. So Jose, all you.
All right. So we're here today. Thank you, Darshak. Thank you, Abdullah, for having me here. Jenny for inviting me. It's great to participate here in Econ Games. And I want to start off with just a little poll from the audience here. I want to know, what graduate schools are you considering? I'm going to talk a little bit about several types of graduate schools and how you should prepare for them. But what type of graduate schools are you considering? You can go either on your phone or open up an extra tab on your computer. Go to pollev.com, put in my name without the Z at the end and 361, and it'll pop up. You'll be able to go ahead and select one of those. Now I see people in the room, so let's see some participation. There we go. And so we have an MBA, we have an MA in economics, and we have a PhD in economics. I've taught in the MBA program. I've had an MA from 2 different schools, and then I of course have the PhD. So I can speak on each one of these things. Surprised no lawyers in the group. Usually there's 1 or 2 lawyers that are come out. All right, well, this is what I'm seeing. I will talk about each one of these. Here's another question. What percentage of people in the US have a PhD? Do you think it's 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, or 5%? Right, so the answer is 1.1%. Only 1.1% of the US population has a PhD. It's actually a little higher worldwide. Worldwide, it's about 2%. One more question. On average, what percentage of principals of economics students become economics majors? I want to give you an idea of like how quickly this funnel shrinks down, right? So what percentage of and this is an average, so some schools are much better at recruiting majors than other schools. So across the US, what average is it when you look at principal students? All right, whoever said the 5 to 10%, I love you. But the actual answer is 2%. About 2% of all principal students end up becoming economics majors. And that's important for us as educators. We have to sit there and think, everyone, not everyone, 98% of the people sitting in front of me, this is going to be their first and last economics class. What do I want them to know? And that's one of the things that at least pushes me, drives me as an educator. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about myself, how I became an economist. I actually went to the University of South Florida with the pre-med hat on. All right, I thought I was going to be a doctor, and so did 50% of my incoming class. They thought that they were all going to be doctors. It turns out about 140,000 students across the nation each year want to be a doctor. That's not what happens though, right? What happened to me is I went to this AMSA meeting, which is the American Medical Student Association meeting. I was taking my biology classes, I was taking my chemistry classes, getting all of those pre-med set up. It's going to be a bio major. And to this day, I can't tell you what this young doctor said or did. All I could remember was her walking on the stage and looking like she just got hit by a bus. She looked like she was so unhappy And then like, this was just one more thing she was doing that day. I left there and I ran to my advisor and I'm like, all right, this pre-med thing may not pan out. So it wasn't an organic chem or anything that blocked me. It was kind of this lifestyle choice. But to give you an idea of how competitive the environment pre-med is, only about 17% of pre-med students actually become doctors, right? So that 140,000 that I told you about half of them actually sit for the MCAT. And half of those actually make scores high enough to apply to medical school. Right? And about half of those, they get in on their first try, and then another 6,000 get in after that. So that works out to 16.7% of that 140,000. It's a competitive field. It's very difficult to get through. So the people who kind of make it through, not only can they persevere, not only are they intelligent, but they have something in them that's like this fire in their belly to make it through. And that fire in the belly is going to be important when I talk about some of these other graduate programs. So how did I end up in the situation I'm at? I left biology like the day after I went to that meeting, and I ran to math. Math was my safety blanket. I know I could go math and do well. So I took the calculus sequence, I took DPQ, I took probability statistics, abstract algebra, all these things. And while this is going on, I'm thinking I'm going to be a math major and I'll just figure it out in the back end. I was participating in different school events, and one of the things that they had there was this orientation program. So I got into summer orientation and I became one of those student leaders, if you will, right? It was a nice thing to do. It paid for my summer. I could cover my summer classes, got a place to stay. I did lots of odd jobs when I was an undergraduate student. One of the things I did was tutor folks in college and in high school in their math classes. I actually taught salsa dancing at nightclubs in the evening. It was a nice way to make a side hustle there. And I did taxes for folks in my resident dorm. They didn't really have all that much money, so it was just doing the EZ over and over again. But it was a nice way of making extra cash. So I end up doing this summer orientation. I'm going through and I'm showing students how they register for classes, how they get their gen eds in. And I run into this instructor named Sue Bartlett. And she was the principal's instructor for economics at the University of South Florida. She doesn't have a PhD, she's an MA, but she's a pro at what she does in teaching principles. And she convinced me to fill my social science requirement by taking this econ thing. And I was like, yeah, I guess I got to do that, right? I've knocked out the math, I've knocked out the science. Let me at least get my social science done through there. And for me, that's when the magic happened, especially coming first from math and then into econ. That's when I got the two things that I love put together, the human behavior plus math, all right? So if you're a people watcher, if you like to see how people interact, if you like to see how people make decisions, econ has kind of a calling to you. And then when you throw in math with it, there is this logic that goes along with the studying of people. So economics married those two things together for me. And it's one of those things that for me, it seemed to make sense. It seemed logical. It seemed like common sense. And you'll hear that a lot from econ majors. What you won't hear from econ majors is a quote that I have heard directly. That is so hard, much harder than what I'm doing. And in this case, it was an engineering major. Economics has a special place in that it allows you to think logically about human behavior, and it lets you see the world in systems rather than just a chaos random reaction that's going on in front of you. And by seeing the world in systems, it lets you see where the world is going. And that to me is it's magic, right? We get to learn the system and then we can apply the system in all different types of places. So just to give you an idea about this, whenever you study slopes, you're really studying marginal costs. You're really studying marginal benefit. Whenever you're taking your parabola and finding its maximum and minimum, you're really studying maximizing profits. You're really studying maximizing utility. It was just marrying those two things together for you. You could see an actual application of the math that you said I'm never going to use, right? It is right there and you are using it. So I was hooked. I was hooked at that point. I ended up staying at South Florida to get an MA degree. They had a diversity a scholarship at that time. And I had taken some of my master's classes as an undergraduate towards the tail end. And so they allowed me to bring in those hours, continue going through the master's program. I was able to finish it in 1 year. Now, I wasn't ready for the PhD at that point. I took that master's in econ. I said, all right, I'm going to do something with it. Let's see what I can do with it. I ended up working for the Center for Urban Transportation Research. And what I studied was bus accidents. And so next time you stop behind a public bus that's coming through, right, you're going to notice that behind it, it almost looks like a Christmas tree in the back. It's got like all these decelerization lights on it. It has red and yellow lights popping up and all this stuff. That's my fault. I was part of a study that looked to see how do we get people to stop rear-ending those buses? How do we get them to not do that? One thought was, oh, we just need to train our drivers better. It turned out that older drivers were the ones that were getting rear-ended more often. And then another thought was, no, we need to find a better way to tell people, yo, there's a bus in front of you, right? It turned out it was just making this capital improvement of putting extra lights on the back of a bus that decreased the number of bus accidents. So I worked for Qatar for a while, but to be honest, studying bus accidents all day, every day for 2 years, it wore on me and I wanted to do something more. So I kind of let fate decide. I applied to a couple of law schools and a couple of PhD schools. And I took the LSAT, I took the GRE, I sent the items out, and I ended up choosing to go to the University of Virginia Economics. Now, I'll tell you why I did that. When you apply to grad school, they tell you to kind of apply to a bunch of schools in the top 50. And I'll get into why that's important a little bit later, but you want to apply into schools in the top 50. And then from there, you want to go to the school that will support you the most. And what I mean by that is that will actually pay for your education. Your PhD, if you're playing the game right, should be paid for, and you're going to work it off usually as a TA or an RA, but it's going to be paid for you. You don't want to be taking out a loan to do a PhD. Master's programs are different, but to do a PhD, that's not something that you want to be taking out a loan to do. I got accepted into Maryland and into Virginia. Maryland accepted me without money. Virginia accepted me with money, and they were one slot apart in that top 50 listing. So for me, it was an easy decision from there. And I packed things up and I went up to Charlottesville, Virginia. Several years later, I ended up here at the University of Louisville as my first gig, and I haven't left since. So now that brings me to what I do, what I research. One of the reasons I took this presentation on is that I recognize through my own work that we need diverse eyes to look at the problems that we have in front of us, because the diversity of, and this comes from all backgrounds. I'm not just saying because of your skin color or your nationality. I'm saying different experiences, rural versus urban, all those matter. Your experiences are what's going to be driving the research topics you chase. I told you I was pre-med. I told you I saw that disheveled doctor come across stage. Somehow I didn't translate that into the marriage market because I ended up marrying a physician while going through her medical school, right? So I study the US healthcare system and all of its multitude of market failures that it has inside of it. The other thing I do is I study how special needs children affect how we make economic decisions. I have a child with autism, so for me, that's a real choice. It's something I have to consider all the time. Like I have to sit here and say any dollar that I spend today on improving his outcomes, whether it be through some form of therapy, a special school or something like that, is a dollar I'm not saving for tomorrow when I'm no longer here and I need someone to take care of him. So I have to make that trade-off decision all the time. I study the unintended consequences of laws and how they affect suicide rates. Right? Suicide is a very prevalent issue that we have in the United States. It's the 10th leading reason for death. And for me, it's hit personally. My grandmother committed suicide in Cuba. And so I have a personal connection to it. I study illicit drug use. I've seen what drugs can do to people. I'm a preacher's kid, so you meet a lot of people as a preacher's kid, and I can see what illicit drugs have done to some folks. And so I want to understand these policies better. Is there a way that we can help them better through policy? And so these are the topics that I study. Sometimes I call them the taboo topics, things that people want to read about but don't want to admit to it, right? But those are the things I study. And then lately I've been really interested in what's going on in my economics classroom. I am a professor at the end of the day, and I want to see my students succeed. So these are the subjects that I study, and they all come from some type of personal connection. And I want you to understand that the things that you're going to end up studying are probably going to have that same type of tie. So you want to go to grad school, right? You could either go straight into the workforce, or you can come over to the side and go off to grad school. I looked up a little bit about who actually goes to grad school, who doesn't, what types of jobs you can get with your econ major, and what types of jobs do econ majors actually end up into. It may surprise you that economists doesn't show up in the top 10. Heck, it doesn't show up in the top 20. You have to go all the way to 23 to see economists. Right, there it is down at the bottom on your bottom right-hand side. And the only reason we make into the 23rd slot is because they lump in market researchers with us. And so when you think about all the possible jobs that economics majors go into, economists is not even in the top 20. It's showing you how versatile of a major it really is. It's the great major for the undecided who wants to still do business, right? It's the great major for the undecided who still wants to be in politics or social science. That's what it has as its benefit. The number one job is some form of manager. And so how I calculated this table here is I went to the American Community Survey, and in the American Community Survey, you can actually see the majors of the people who went to college. The nice thing about the American Community Survey is that it's representative of the entire United States. You can download and get about 3 million observations. You can then weight that up to get your 350 million US residents here. And from there, I was able to construct this list. So the top two are going to be manager and lawyer. That's why I was surprised I didn't see any lawyers in here. The other ones that you'll see after that are financial managers, CEOs, accountants, a lot of workforce and management analysts. In fact, basically any job that ends with analyst, an economist could probably apply to. But who wants to go to grad school? It turns out that social scientists in general are very optimistic about their chances of going to grad school. The charts that you see before you tell you what percentage of people believe they would only get their bachelor's degree versus getting some advanced degree. So the dark blue there are the folks who say they're going to end at their bachelor's. And about 30% of everyone who goes to college says that their bachelor's degree is their terminal degree. For the social science, it's about 25.7%. But look how many people are saying they're going to go to some form of grad school, right? So you have 42% of people who have a social science as their major are going to go and get a master's. You have another 15% on top of that who say they're going to go off and get some professional degree. So this is your JD, your MBA. And then this other group of people on top of that, so 12.3% on top of that believe they're going to go and get their PhD. And that's much, much larger than what you see in general, and definitely what you see just in business. In business, that same number is only 2.8%. So then I went ahead and I looked at the distribution that actually happens, right? So the previous one was what people said they were going to do. As good economists, we like to study people's actions rather than what they say. And what we actually see happen is that 60% of people stop at the bachelor's degree. So they stop with their bachelor's degree in econ, but there's still a fairly large percentage, about 27.5%, who go off to do a master's degree, another 8.5% do some form of a professional degree, and then 4% still go off to do the PhD. Now, among the PhD, the ratios are about the same for men and women across all of these categories, but they are 2 to 1, meaning that for every two men, there is one woman who goes off to get a PhD. So there is a bit of a gender imbalance, something that has improved over time, but we still need to catch up. So that brings me over to what the distribution of economics majors looks like by race. I'm here, and lots of the other people are here to see these numbers become more diverse, and they actually have become more diverse over time, but it is predominantly white and Asian. Once you go past those two groups, you're talking about 10% making up everyone else. All right, so 90% are either white or Asian. Black comes in at only 5.9%. Other multiple races comes in at 4%, and then Native Americans and Alaskan Natives come in at less than 0.5%. We don't include Hispanics in there because we're looking at race versus ethnicity when we're talking about Hispanics. Hispanics make up about 7.2% of this group. If you're one of my students and you're in the audience and you've come and asked me this question, you probably already heard this part of the talk before. I have two conversations when a student approaches me about grad school. My first conversation is often very excited, right? So I'm very excited when you come in, you talk to me about going to law school, going to public policy, getting an MBA, thinking about data analytics, going to urban planning, something of that nature. I'm gung-ho right behind you, trying to look up schools, what is a nice fit for you. I'm very happy for you. But when you come in, you ask me, I want to get a PhD in economics, a certain question pops into my head. Who taught you to hate yourself, right? And I know that might sound a little awkward, sound a little different, but I need to know that you want to do this because you love economics, and this is something that you want to get up every day and do it over and over again. If you're doing it for the money, a master's will probably earn you more money in the long run. If you're doing it for just the title or what have you, it's not. Again, only 1% of the population has it. A lot of people are pretty successful, and titles of CEO probably sound better than PhD in lots of other places. So that can't be the reason. You need to do it because there's a fire in your belly, and that fire in your belly is what's going to get you through the program. That's what's really going to let you survive, so you become the PhD. And so those are my two different conversations I have with students when they say they have the PhD, that they want to do the PhD. And when they say they do want to do that PhD and they've kind of passed this isthmus test here, that they really do love it, I'm going to be right behind you. I'm going to try to guide you the whole way through. We have 2 students right now who are going to be applying for grad school next year. They're going through all those major steps, writing some papers along the way to try to make them marketable. But now let's talk about the different types of grad school. And the first one isn't really a grad school, but it's one that people sometimes ignore, and that's the actuary program. When we look at actuaries, they do a bit of a grad school just through examinations. The way an actuary program works is that you'll get an undergraduate degree, often in math, economics, or some form of statistics, and you need to take 3 exams. These 3 exams are probability, financial mathematics, investments, and financial markets. Once you pass those 3 exams, you are now an actuary, and you can go and practice as an actuary. You might say, what is an actuary? What is actuarial science? The definition is to study problems of insurance and finance through mathematical modeling. Actuaries develop methodological models to evaluate the current financial implications of uncertain future events. That sounds like a whole lot. Let me make it really simple for you. They predict when bad crap happens to you for a profit. Like that's really what they do. At the end of the day, they want to figure out, all right, what's the likelihood you're going to get into an accident? What's the likelihood that you're going to hurt yourself? What's the likelihood that you're going to die? What's the likelihood that you're going to go bankrupt? They're trying to predict all those things so they can buy the correct insurance to protect against that potential loss. That's what they're up to. And you might say that sounds very depressing. When you look at scales of happiness for occupation, actually pretty high among all the ones that are out there. There's probably lots of self-selection bias in it, but the folks who go into these actuary programs tend to be quite happy for what they're doing. So what's the path for becoming an actuary? You take those exams that we talked about. Usually you get your new job right after your second exam. And while you're on the job will give you, if you will, a bit of a sabbatical, not a long one, but a small sabbatical time for you to study and get ready for that exam 3. Once you get that exam 3 done underneath your belt, you are now an official actuary. And a lot of people stop there. They're very happy with the salary they earn at that point, but there are more exams that you could take. And those 2 extra exams that come afterwards are going to be the MASH parts, so MASH 1 and MASH 2. When you pass those 2, you're well into the 6 figures at that point. Most of this studying is done, again, on your own, but often on company time, meaning that your company is paying for you to make these investments in yourself. Fewer people make it past this window of the 4th exam to the 5th and 6th exam, but you can continue along this progress, and it only continues to increase your salary from each point forward. Usually what happens towards the end is that you're actually learning some more management and some more sophisticated statistical models. So that's the actuary program. I wanted to include it in here because it is something you can do after your BA. That's not quite graduate school, but it sounds a lot like it with all of its exams in the way. Next is law school and the MBA. Law school and the MBA are the professional schools, the professional degrees that you hear about. If you're going to go into law school, one thing I do want to warn you about is there are a lot of lawyers. There are a lot of lawyers out there. It's going to be competitive. So you have to be pretty business savvy if you're going to go into law and then come out on the other side and still be profitable. When you think about the majors that produce the highest LSAT scores, it's usually a combination or a changing of place between 3 undergraduate majors: economics, philosophy, and physics. And they just rotate who's on top. I think 2 years ago, econ was on top. Physics might have beaten us out this year, but they just rotate who's on top between those 3. As an econ major, there is evidence to show that econ majors who become lawyers tend to earn more than other lawyers from other majors. And so they picked up some of that business savvy along the way. I would recommend taking courses like industrial organization, law and economics, public econ, and definitely logic if you're going to be going into law school. I can tell you when I teach my law and economics course, one of the parts that we cover is contracts. And I've gotten emails back from my students when they go to law school about how much that law and econ course made them shine during their contracts courses in law school. So there's a direct connection that you get between learning the economics of law as well as the application of law once you get into law school. When it comes to the MBA is a great degree for someone who has come from a non-business background and wants to get all those skills together in a very short amount of time. So if you're an econ major who basically followed the Bachelor of Arts route and took your foreign language, did your other things outside of the discipline, this is a good way if you want to orient yourself towards business. If you're from the humanities or an engineer or something else and you want to come into business, the MBA is great for that. My suggestion to you, though, is if you do that or you're even thinking about it, take the GMAT while you're still in school. Of all of the standardized tests that are out there, the GMAT actually has the longest shelf life. They'll give you about 5 years on that shelf life for your GMAT scores. So why not take it when you know how to study, you're used to studying, right? Because you're in college, and you're probably going to remember a lot of the mathematics that you need for the GMAT a lot better while you're in school. So you want to take that one towards the end of your senior year to keep its shelf life up for as long as possible. MBA programs, they differentiate themselves by when they allow you to start really and how highly ranked they are. Some MBA programs allow you to come right in after your bachelor's degree. Many others, particularly in the top 20, want to see some business experience first. They want to see you out in the field. They want to see what war stories you may have to share with your classmates. And to do that, you need to have the experience. If you want to take, though, the business route and you kind of want to stay ahead, double major in econ and finance, and you're gonna rock probably the hardest courses in the MBA because of that background. You'll be able to pick up the other ones along the way. The last thing I would tell you to work on, and this is true both for law school and the MBA, is work on your interpersonal skills. You got to be able to relate to people. In both cases, you're talking about businesses that are all about relationships. They're all about trust. And if you can't convey trust, if you can't get people to back you, you're going to have a tough time in business. You're going to have a tough time when it comes to law. So you want to be able to work on those interpersonal skills. And getting involved in student activities, being a leader in, say, a student-run organization, that helps develop those skills. So I would suggest you to work on those interpersonal skills. For my data heads, though, it's a little bit of a different route, right? So if you're going to go off and do either an MA in econ, public policy, or data analytics, in all these cases, you're going to take some form of statistics. Heck, statistics would even help you in law. And you might say, how's it going to help me in law? Well, think about your typical null hypothesis, right? You're setting up your null. You're saying, this is what we believe to be true. You're going to try to get some evidence to reject that null hypothesis to say, okay, this is what is actually happening. Well, what's law? You are presumed innocent until proven guilty, right? Isn't that the null? And what do you do to figure out if the person is innocent or not? Well, you get some evidence, you present that evidence, and if there's enough evidence, you reject the null. You say the person is guilty. And if you don't have enough evidence, do you say they're innocent? No, you say they're not guilty. You see that? You failed to reject the null in that case. So there's still that tie between the two. You're going to take a lot of statistics, regardless of the regardless of the public program that you choose, graduate program you choose, you're going to take some form of statistics. So try to get a leg up on that and grab it while you're still in undergrad. Besides those courses, if you're doing an MA in econ, I would suggest math econ course if they offer it at your institution, and taking Calc 1 and Calc 2. Both of those will help you, particularly when you talk about probability in conjunction with metrics. If you're going to go into data analytics, you're going to need that calc sequence, you're going to need some probability theory, and you should probably pick up a programming language. Python is one of the more popular languages that are out there because you can use it not just for statistics, but also for general programming purposes. If you know you're only going to be doing stat, R is another great option to pick up along the way. If you're interested more in public policy, then learn about public policy. So learn industrial organization, right? How do we organize markets? How do people take advantage of the way we organize markets? Take public economics, figure out how does the government interfere with markets? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? We have both positive and negative externalities. And then take some poli-sci classes to figure out what are the ways that you can argue to reallocate resources. And so those are my suggestions for the master's programs. In comes the PhD, right? You show me you have the fire in the belly and the light in your eyes. You've made it this far. So what do you need to do? You need to take as much math as you can possibly stomach. Like that's really the truth. The bare minimum is to take the full calc sequence. So you're going to take calc 1 through 3. You're going to take linear algebra, and you're going to take regression-based statistics. You need those 3. That's the minimum. What I would suggest on top of that, though, is to take econometrics. Econometrics undergrad saved me in grad school. It absolutely did. I was very well trained by the time I went to UVA in econometrics, and it showed when it came to taking my comp exams, when it came to performing in those classes. Take that advantage now when you can get it over not as competitive environment, and with people who are out there willing to help you for it. Plus, you're in a world where it's just so much more accessible than it was when it was taught to me. Take math or economics if you can, particularly if you still don't see the connection between math and econ. It's a course that does do that, and does it in a very factual way, a very direct way, structured way of doing it. The other last three courses I'm going to tell you to take are what you see most programs recommend. So differential equations. Differential equations, it's very useful, particularly if you're going to go into macroeconomics. Probability theory is going to help you with some of the harder econometrics that you're going to experience in graduate school. And then real analysis. Real analysis, if you don't know what it is, it's proving that like the number zero exists. I know that that's hard to believe, but it's the proof class. It's showing you that you can actually make proofs about people's behavior, that we actually can show this theoretically. If these logical laws are held up, what would be the behavior of a person? So the real analysis class teaches you how to make those proofs. What do these PhD programs look for? Really, they look for your GRE score, particularly your GRE score in your quant and in your analytics. They don't put a lot of weight on your English score. They put a huge amount of weight on your quantitative score. And so if you're in the 90th percentile or above, you're very competitive when it comes to these economics courses, or economics programs, sorry. If you're not in that 90th percentile, it is going to be a harder push for you. You're going to need to be able to show that you did really well in those math classes I just talked about when you go to apply to those programs. What else do you need? Well, if you have any interest whatsoever in following the PhD, you need to talk to one of your professors as early as possible. Because they're going to help you try to map out those math courses for you along with your econ major. What you don't want to do is find yourself in a situation where you're now a junior or even worse, a senior, and you're like, oh, now I want to do a PhD, and you haven't taken all those other math courses. You haven't had the time to write a paper or do something associated with research. And so I would suggest you talk to your professor as early as possible. Try to become an RA for free if you can. Usually it is a bit of a two-way road in the sense that they're going to teach you how to do research, and you're going to be helping them with some active research questions that they're writing. Write a senior thesis if that's an option that's available for you. Write a paper in econometrics. This has a dual benefit to you. Not only does it help you for your PhD program, but when you go off for job interviews, this is a story you can tell. You can actually tell the employer, the potential employer here, oh, I wrote this paper and these were the findings and this is the data I used and this is the analysis I did. And that's what employers want to hear. They want to hear how you think when you go through these processes. So it's something that's going to have a dual purpose for you. I will say you don't actually have to be an econ major to get a PhD in economics. I know that sounds weird, but there are lots of people who go into the PhD who don't come from an econ background. I will say, though, that after you make it past your prelims, which is usually the big weed out section, folks who were econ majors have a higher survival rate in the program after that. And so there is this trade-off between the two. The other thing that might surprise you is that who has a PhD in the US has changed over time by quite a bit. All right. When you go into your graduate school, particularly if you're an American, you're going to be the minority in the room. All right. In my graduate school, we were 40 students in that class, and we were only 10 Americans in the class. And of the 10 Americans, 3 of us finished. So it's gonna feel quite different in that classroom. So just expect that. If you need proof positive of that, look over your professors in your college, you're probably already seeing some of that diversity that exists within those graduate programs. All right, so some tips. We're here near the end. Talk to your professor as early as you can. There is a path to success and you need to know it. All right. 2, be realistic. I want you to apply for these top 50 programs, or if you can, look at programs that have certain advisors that have a good record, a good placement record. The number one question you should always ask yourself when you're considering a school is, where do their graduates go? And if they go to places you would want to work at, then that's the school you should apply to. That's very, very important. And I don't think it's asked enough by potential candidates. You really need to look at the placement record of these programs. It will not be over in 4 years. So don't plan on a 4-year window. They're going to show you a flight plan that says you can finish in 4 years, but that's not what's going to happen. The median finish time is 5.6 years. That's the median. And so really try to look at a 5 to 6 year window. Lastly, and this is why I said you have to have this fire in the belly to get through, you need to take care of your mental health if you're going to be doing the PhD. We know from many surveys, ones that are even econ specific, that about 18 students experience some form of moderate anxiety to severe anxiety in the PhD. Right? You're going to be questioning, why are you still there? You're going to be questioning whether you should stay in the program. You need to take care of your mental health, because if you do that, you'll be able to keep that fire that's going inside of you longer. You don't want someone to come in and put the flames out. So you really need to take care of your mental health if you're going to go through this PhD program. All right. Last thing I want to talk about is, what does the PhD look like if you're going to go through it? Your first year, you're going to be taking a math camp course of some sort. So it's math for economics. You're going to take a micro course. You're going to take a macro course. And you're going to take an econometrics course. Your next semester, you're going to take those same things, but just part 2. And then at the end of that semester, you're going to take what are known as comprehensive exams, comp exams, prelim exams. Generally, there is one in microeconomics, one in macroeconomics, and one in econometrics. Every school has their own policy about which ones you can fail and retake versus which ones you can't. At UVA, at the time when I took them, micro was one exam and macro and econometrics were a joint exam together. If you passed both, then you went ahead and continued in the program. If you failed one of them, you had an opportunity to pass the other one, but if you fail twice, you're done with the program. And if you fail both, you're done. You walk out with a master's pass. So that's the setup. That's the big filter when we're talking about exams in this. The next year, you take your field specializations, and those are all dependent really on the school you're at, but that can be IO, health, labor, public, so on and so forth. You do take field exams at the end of that year, but generally speaking, most people do really well on those because those are the ones that they wanted to take anyway. And after that comes the nomadic year. This is the year where you have to go out and find your dissertation proposal. All right, so it's as if your professors say, okay, you have learned enough now, my child, go off and wander into the wilderness and come back with a tablature of your question. If you successfully do that, then you'll have your proposal. Your proposal defense is really the hardest part in this PhD. Is finding that question that will get you over the hump and that people believe will be a good question. Once you've made it past your proposal, and that proposal is the next great filter, you will work on your PhD. The time it takes you to finish the PhD is going to be dependent on you and what success you can have along the way. But by the time you get to your dissertation defense, if everyone in your committee has basically said you're ready to defend, it probably is just going to be you and your committee in that room as you go through it. And hopefully everything works out, you walk out as a doctor. But that's the sequence when it comes to the PhD. I'm going to leave the remaining time open for questions. but I hope you learned something along the way. I know it was a lot of information in a very short period of time.
Thank you, Jose. That was actually really, really good. I actually learned quite a bit myself, so that was fantastic. A couple of things, of audience, you guys can unmute yourself and ask a question, or you could leave a question on chat. There was one, I think you covered it, but we can revisit it if you have missed something. Was from Tal, asking, would love to hear what you thought was most difficult about the PhD, how you deal with that or dealt with that challenge.
So I'll tell you a little story that's personal to me about it. Right. I didn't pass my comp exams the first time through. The way that our macro comp exam was set up was that you had metrics and macro put together, and it was a Cobb Douglas. And so if you fail one, you failed the whole thing, right? And I didn't do so well in one of the parts of macro, so I had to end up taking it again. And the comp exam, at least for us, was the penalty exam. So if you fail to propose on time, you had to take the comp exams again. So this is what happened to me. I didn't pass I actually passed the macrometrics one. I didn't pass the micro one high enough the first time around. I took it the second time, passed it fine, made it through. I went up for my proposal, which was the hardest part. Finding a good topic for me was frankly the hardest part. I didn't come up with a topic on time, so I had to take the comp exams again. Passed them again. And what was weird about this particular time was that it was during a time where there was broad cheating occurring at UVA. You can look it up, you can do a quick Google, but there was huge amounts of cheating. And they used my exam, since I had none of their professors, they used my exam as kind of like the check on everyone. I was so mad taking that exam too. I was sitting all in the back going through it, all the way through it, but took that exam. But yeah, the proposal is easily the hardest part. There is not a lot of guidance. Programs have gotten much better about this, particularly programs that make a second year paper requirement along with a third year paper. The programs who do that, they're setting you up for success. They're making you start to go through those steps. We didn't have that. We really did get to our third year, and it was like, all right, good luck. Talk to us when you find something. And that was rough. It was really rough to find a topic on your own.
It's great.
Before we have another question come in, I just want to remind everybody that next week we have Dr. Michael Jones from the University of Cincinnati to talk about applied microeconomics master's programs. I think he's going to be more specific about the UC program, but it will be really interesting to hear different perspectives. Jose, Dr. Fernandez mentioned earlier that one thing that we all believe in is the different perspectives and the diversity of thought and experiences that add value to our overall learning. So I'll be really interested to see his experience of what he learned next week. There are a couple of questions in the chat, and one of them says, how do you find economic adjacent programs like political economy or heterodox programs?
So I would say that with those programs, it has to meet your interests, right? Like you should only be doing the PhD because you have a passion in the subject. And some programs really are more specialized than others. So like we know in economics that if you go to UMass Amherst, that's going to be a heterodox program. And if that's what calls to you, those are the types of programs you should be seeking out. If instead you're a econometrics type of person, you should be looking at your UC San Diego's, you should be looking at your Minnesotas and places like that. If you're a labor person, you should be right chasing down those labor economists. You need to match your passion with people who are also passionate on those sides of it. That's the way I look at it. And I kind of do the same thing for when I think about people who want to go into like public policy or policy analysts. Like if at the end of the day you want to study policy and not really do economics, then go study policy. Go do that. If what you want to do at the end of the day is look at health outcomes and not health economics, go do that. Go do public health instead. You know, you don't have to take the econ route. I just want to make sure you make a decision that is going to match your passion. There's nothing worse in this world, I think, than taking a lot of time out to invest in education and then going to a job that you're going to hate for the next 30 years. Like that is the worst sentence I think you can impose on someone. I do this and I love coming to work every day, right? Like my wife, when she makes a mistake, we get sued. When I make a mistake, I just hit backspace and the mistake goes away. Right? I get to talk about ideas all day. All day I get to talk about ideas. I get to talk about how can we make this place a better place that we live in. It's great. I love that. I love that economics is flexible enough that I can talk about meth labs and alcohol bans, that I can talk about the effects of motorcycle helmet laws on organ donations, right? Things that you may not think are connected are connected because we live in a world of systems, and each one of these systems, they reverberate throughout the universe. And it's our job to pick up those little trails, those little vibrations that go through. Let's see, there was a question here about what
Great.
exercise.
And there's another question.
Yeah,
exactly.
What exercise do you do while looking for dissertation topics? One exercise that is useful is if you're just stuck and you can't do anything, find a paper that you liked and replicate it. Just going through that process of trying to replicate the paper and seeing, in one, if the science holds up, and two, learning the process of what they're doing, it's going to be useful. It's going to let you learn more about that subject matter more intimately. And it's actually going to help you when you do get that idea along the way, because now you'll know what steps you need to take. So replication is one of my suggestions.
I have a question for you, Jose. This is something that I struggle with, but how early should a student come talk to you if they're interested in graduate school, period? Is there such thing as too early?
So you need to have survived your intermediate classes, I think, and feel good about it, right? Like if it still sounds like common sense to you after your intermediate classes, then that's a good time. Usually you get the bug, I will say, after an elective. There's some elective that you took and the professor really wowed you at that point, that this is something you want to dig into further. So we're looking at your late sophomore year, early junior years when it happens. The hope is that you're still on the right path with your gen eds at this point. So you've gotten through your gen eds for your freshman and sophomore year, so that by the time you get to your junior year, you can start thinking about plugging in some of those math classes that you're going to need along the way. That's usually what happens. The worry for us is that they come to your senior year. And when they come to your senior year, usually my suggestion is to go and do a master's program if they can. That will be the most structured way to do it. If they want to do post-bac stuff, they have to have a lot of self-discipline on their side to do the post-bac stuff. But the MA route is a good route to take if what you do is you realize your senior year, you're going to have to do it. And it does happen. Like I have one of my better professors here, Beth Munich, she did a public policy MA in between going to the PhD. So she did divert, right? And then came to economics afterwards.
Great. Well, if no other, there is a question. How do you think about US versus international PhD programs in econ? And yes, while you were talking about this, I wanted to point out, because I get a lot of questions via the YouTube channel from international markets, and my advice has always been US centric. So I think most of the conversation here has been US centric, and international markets are a little bit different with their master's and PhD programs. But what is your thought about the pros and cons of US versus international?
So to me, there's two major educational markets for the PhD, and that's Europe and the US. If you want to stay in Europe, or you want to be a PhD in Europe, go to a European school, particularly if you're in some of these countries where the PhD is almost free. So like Germany is one of them, for example. you may want to consider that. If you're outside of Europe or the US, there is still more ganache, if you will, with the US degree. It'll get you further with the US degree. But if you're really just considering US and Europe, it's a flip, because Brown hires people from European institutions. So the plane goes both ways when you look at those markets. It's when you're outside of those markets that you tend to see the US ones dominate, particularly in Asia, they dominate more, and in Latin America, they dominate more. In Europe, though, when you consider maybe India or Africa, probably the United Kingdom schools are the ones that would dominate a little bit more. So your London School of Economics, your Oxfords, those places would get a little bit more traction. Bocconi, so that's in Italy. Toulouse School of Economics, those are the ones that would get a little bit more traction out in those areas. So it's going to matter where you want to end up. But if you're kind of a flip between the two, then US or Europe will work fine.
Perfect, Jose. Thank you so much for your time. This was valuable information for myself, and I'm sure for the attendees as well. A recorded version of this will be shared on my YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. There are some questions that people had. Is there a good way for people to reach out to you if they're interested in learning more from you, Jose?
Yeah, so you can just shoot me an email. My address is easy. It's just my name, Jose.Fernandez @louisville.edu. Or you can catch me on Twitter @U of L Econ. That will get you my fastest responses. One of those two places, Twitter or Econ. Those are easy ways to get in contact with me. And if I see you around, always feel free to ask me those questions. This is one of the pieces of service that I love doing. I love reaching out because someone did it for me, and I want to know that it's possible for you too.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Fernandez. And thank you to the attendees. Y'all have a great one. See you next week. Same time, I'll send out the link for the Zoom link for next week. Have a good one, everybody.
Take care.